So, to get things started here, I want to take you on a tour around the Photoshop interface. Now remember, we are actually in Photoshop now. We're not in Camera Raw. This is actually in the Photoshop program. So if you are shooting in Camera Raw, you would apply your initial adjustments in Camera Raw, open up the image, and this is what you would get. So if we look to the left of our screen here, we have a tool panel, or what in earlier editions of Photoshop were called a tool bar. And within that tool bar, we can kind of segregate some of the different tools according to how they function in our image. So this first group of tools up here are basically selection tools. So if you notice, I took the lasso selection tool, and this tool is basically you're like drawing using a lasso. So you make a circle around something, and then if you were going to make an adjustment, that adjustment would only happen within that area. So in this sense here, I'll just do an adjustment, and you can see how that's only happening within that selection. So these top tools right here are for making selections. And if you also notice, there's a little triangle underneath there that takes you back to some hidden tools that are behind the tool that is being displayed here. So if you notice on that lasso tool, I go in and press that teeny little triangle in the lower right corner, and we end up seeing the polygonal lasso tool and then the magnetic lasso tool. So these tools again are for making selections. The next tool down is another important tool. This is our crop tool. And our crop tool is great because it allows us to crop an image to a specific dimension. Now if we look up at the top of the screen here, and by the way, I'm going to get rid of this selection that I've made by just doing Control D here. And so if you notice this pull down box here, it allows us to crop to some presets. So we can make 1x1 crop to a square, or 5x7 if you're doing a 5x7 print. And you could flip-flop that from vertical to horizontal orientation. Really, the ideal way to crop, though, is go to the top and pull down the W by H by resolution. And in there, you can actually crop to the size that you're going to output to. So if we were blowing up the images for the gallery display in the library, those are 36 inches by 24 inches. And an important thing here is the pixels per inch. We always want to be at 300 pixels per inch if we're printing physical prints. If we're just outputting for the web, we would only want to be at 72 pixels per inch. So whenever you make your crop selection, and you do that just by dragging your mouse, and then you can move the square, and then just hitting that check mark up in the upper right corner of the screen, and that will crop it to the exact dimension. Of course, if you don't like what you did, you can always go back under Edit and then just do Undo, or Command Z, and that will get you back to where you were. So that's our crop tool. The next tool underneath that is an eyedropper tool. This basically gives us some measurements of color within our photograph. We're going to kind of hold off on that for now. That's a little bit more of an advanced feature here. But we will move down to some of our retouching tools. And I'm going to actually hold that down to get those tools behind it. And we'll actually start with the spot healing brush. And I've actually selected this image very specifically because it's a perfect example of where we could use this spot healing brush. So when we select the spot healing brush, you'll notice a circle appears on our screen, and we can make that circle smaller or larger simply by pulling down this window and changing the size. And if you notice in this image, we've got a lot of dust spots in the imager in the sky. So a quick way to get rid of these dust spots is just take our tool, make the circle just slightly larger than your dust spot, and then give it one click, and that is going to heal it automatically. So for this image, we could make pretty quick work out of a lot of these dust spots using this tool. There's a very similar tool called the Healing Brush tool right underneath that. That tool does require you to take a sample from one area and apply it to the other to heal. So if you'll notice, I'm holding down the Option button on my keyboard. I get a little bullseye. I click there, and that's giving me a sample from that spot, and then that sample gets applied to another spot. So it works pretty good there, but let's say I took a sample from here, and then you'll notice that sample gets put somewhere else, and obviously that's not something we want there. So the difference between the two, the first one is it looks at the pixels around it and tries to make the pixels within the tool match what's outside. The Healing Brush tool below it, we're actually taking a sample from another area of the photo and applying that to the new spot. The third one that I want to bring your attention to here is the Patch tool. And this is kind of a combination of a selection and a healing tool. So anytime you want to fix an area, we can draw a circle around that and make a selection, and then drag that circle to another area, and it'll fill in the selection you made with the sky or whatever it is from the other area. So again, another way to kind of get rid of these dust spots is to use that tool. The next tool below that, so we had a couple other tools. The red eye tool, again, that might be one you use if you get red eye in your portraits, but for now we're just going to move on to the brush tool. And the brush tool acts like a paintbrush, but this is a really important tool because we're going to use this in a little bit more sophisticated way once we start doing our adjustments in layers over here. But the one thing I want you to remember about the brush tool is that the brush tool functions off of the colors that are right here. And to get those colors to black and to white, we just click on that teeny little icon right there, and we have black in the foreground. So you can see I'm painting and I'm actually getting black on there. And we can change the opacity of what you're painting like that. And if you want to switch it to white, obviously you just click that button right down there, and that gets you there. So really important tool, but one that isn't necessarily used to paint on and paint off color. We're actually going to use it in a little different manner, and I'll explain that to you in a little bit. Underneath that is the Clone tool. The Clone tool allows us, again, to take a sample from one area and stamp it onto another area. And to take that sample, we hold the Option button down. You'll get, again, the bullseye. Click once, it takes the sample, and then move your mouse and you can apply it in another spot. And it will continue to apply that every time you click the mouse. So again, we'll go in and undo that. Now the difference between this